The Ultimate Tax Resolution Guide. Learn the complete strategies of tax debt elimination. This will cover 13 different chapters. Picture owing thousands of dollars and you want to get rid of it with the IRS. This is exactly what you need to know to get rid of your tax debt. And one of the founding members of the Constitution, Benjamin Franklin, is famous for quoting, "The only thing that is certain in this world is death and taxes." I think he'd be surprised by how complicated things are in today's world. TaxPro Serge is the presenter. Sergio Melendez, he's an enrolled agent, Juris Doctorate. With nearly 2 decades of experience, he is the founder and primary power of attorney here at Semper Tax Relief. A veteran of the United States Marine Corps, has personally resolved over $250 million in IRS tax debt on behalf of his clients as a power of attorney. He is also the team leader with the Semper Tax Relief team. We need a starting point when it comes to fixing tax problems. So I call this the pre-resolution checklist, which is you have to be all caught up in tax filings. So somebody that has years of unfiled tax, and maybe one of the beginning points is doing the last 6 years with the IRS. Keep in mind, if you have state income tax problems, you may have a different requirement with your state. In addition, part of this is you got to fix your past mistakes, and you have to understand what's the main reason why you got into tax problems. If you fix things today, you cannot have a future problem. If so, all your problems may be coming back. Now, next on up is if you have IRS collections, meaning that you have no resolution in place, you got to address this. Sometimes you have to put forth a temporary solution before you could move on to the next step. So always determine where you are at in collections. That way you could stop the garnishments, stop the levies, and deal with this first before you move on. The IRS will automatically forgive your entire balance. It sounds crazy, okay, but the legal terminology is called the Collection Statute Expiration Date. So the IRS does have 10 years to collect. Upon the 10 years, the entire balance does expire and the IRS no longer has a right to collect against you. This is a key factor when it comes to a tax relief program. So if you have financial hardship, which is going to be discussed later, we can evaluate whether the offer in compromise might make sense. But if the CSED date is right around the corner, then maybe something else is the better option. With this, you absolutely have to be careful. There are several things that definitely extend the time clock on this. Those are called tolling events, such as bankruptcy or a failed offer in compromise. You absolutely have to review your rights. You're going to be discussing and talking things with the IRS, and these agents overstep their boundaries. By you getting educated on your Taxpayer Bill of Rights, you get to know exactly where to put up a wall and a defense against the IRS. Highlighting some of the key aspects of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights is the first one is the right to be informed. You must be told what's happening with your taxes and the reasons why. You also have the right to quality of service. So the IRS cannot treat you bad, yell at you, curse at you, or make you do things that you do not want to do. Also, one of your other rights is the right to pay no more than the correct amount of tax. And one of my favorite highlighting is the right to be represented. This is where you could authorize somebody to step in your shoes when you authorize them with a tax power of attorney on Form 2848. Now, the Fresh Start Initiatives. This is such a general and broad term. However, the name is absolutely deceiving. The Fresh Start Initiatives got passed back in 2011. That's a heck of a long time from now. And what you see lately is a bunch of advertisements. Fresh Start this, Fresh Start that. However, it is now used more of a marketing scam than what it really is. The major highlight of the Fresh Start Initiatives is to repay your balances within time without disclosing your finances to the IRS. Now, in addition to that, the offer in compromise was much more complicated to get accepted, and they basically chopped the requirements in half. But nevertheless, it's not as fresh start as you think. Chapter 6. These 3 tax relief programs are the biggest ones that most people qualify for. The first one is the one everybody wants, offer in compromise. This is actually settling for less than what you owe. It is offering the IRS a certain amount. However, that amount has to be calculated. If you have more income and assets than what you have in tax balances, then you just set up a repayment plan. However, the 2 other versions, the currently non-collectible status and the partial pay installment plan, are both hardship programs, meaning you're not going to pay your tax debt in full. All of these 3 programs are based upon your current finances, and these all consider when that expiration date is going to be. Chapter 7, challenging the IRS when you legally do not owe the money. So there's another program called the Doubt as to Liability Program. This is another version of the offer in compromise, but you must have your calculation of the reasons why you do not owe. Now, there are other aspects to this as well. If you never showed up to an audit or have additional proof of an audit that was already closed off, you have to do a reconsideration of that. In addition to that, there's an AUR CP2000 underreporting issue. If you didn't have the right proof, but now you do, but that's already been finalized, you also submit a reconsideration. Now, here's also when it comes to some equitable relief. If you never filed a tax return, the IRS did it for you. They did an SFR return. You could submit an original return, replacing that SFR and reducing your tax debt or eliminating your tax debt. So under these programs, you have to meet specific criteria And whenever you submit a packet to the IRS, make sure you neatly organize the entire packet to make it easy for the IRS to read your entire packet. Because if you make their job easier, you might just get all of this accepted. Chapter 8, IRS Payment Plan Options. So who would have thought that it'd be so complicated to set up a payment plan with the IRS? So they have different versions of it. The first one being the guaranteed installment plan. This is when you generally owe $10,000 or less. They are automatically going to accept a payment plan. Now keep in mind, the whole 10-year statute date, the CSED date, is very key, very important to all of these payment plans. Next on up is what we call the Fresh Start Installment Agreement. That's when you owe under $25,000. The IRS would accept a payment plan for 72 months, no questions asked, or you could submit the payment by mail. A direct debit from your checking account is optional. Next on up is if you owe over $25,000 but under $50,000, it's still part of the Fresh Start Installment Plan. IRS will not review your financials. However, it needs to be direct debit from a checking account. Now, once you hit the $50,000 threshold, it complicates things. There are times where the IRS would want to review your financial information to see if they could collect it within 72 months or longer. However, after the $50,000 mark, they will be filing federal tax liens. But the IRS can be flexible enough to either accept a 72-month payment plan or an 84-month payment plan. Now, they could also drag out a payment plan that stretches out all the way up until the final date that you owe the money on, the statute date. And if none of these payment plans make sense for you and you're just unable to afford it, then you have to prove it on up through financial hardship and set up the partial pay installment plan, or what we call is the hardship payment plan. Chapter 9, Penalty Forgiveness. The IRS does remove penalties. They could be failure to file penalty, the failure to pay penalty, or any of the civil penalties. However, normally the penalty abatement comes into play when you normally pay off your taxes in full or you set up a payment plan of which you stretch out and pay your taxes in full. The IRS forgives the penalties under two different criteria, either what's called the first-time abatement of penalties or where you have reasonable cause. First-time abatement of penalty, you generally don't have to prove anything. You make that request once you have a resolution in place. With reasonable cause, you have to prove your case as far as why the IRS should forgive it. A person in your shoes, you filed late because, and you answer the question, or you didn't pay because, and you answer the question. Whatever your answer is, should prove a reasonable cause, a reasonable excuse. We're moving on to Chapter 10, the IRS Appeals Program, also known as the strike back method. When you make a proposal to fix your tax problem, no matter what it is, the IRS may reject, deny, or heck, not even look at your stuff. So here's where you could say, hey, I disagree with you, IRS. Here's the reasons why. And you got to make sure you file a timely request for appeals. Now, this might be common when the IRS takes some kind of collection action against you, such as they file a federal tax lien, they issue a bank levy, a wage garnishment, or they reject an installment plan, offering compromise, something along the lines like that, which is key and why you would want to review your Taxpayer Bill of Rights as well. Right, brings us to Chapter 11, IRS Procedure and Case Management. Here's where you probably would need to use some kind of tools in order to stay organized. Either have some kind of Google Drive with all your folders, or Dropbox. There's also one tool known as ClickUps, where you can have different stages coded to see where you're at in your case. Because there's always two sides regarding resolving your tax issue. One is the technicality aspect. Do you qualify based upon the qualifications? The other part is the procedure part, the navigation, and sometimes waiting up to months for approval or just waiting on assignment of a specific agent. Even if you're quick to use Alexa or Siri to give you reminders or setting up some kind of online calendar for you to review and call back IRS to maintain contact. Or for you to review and maintain contact with the IRS. Or some kind of calendar system where you could review to be in contact with the IRS. Here's also where you want to review items such as correspondence or mail or letters that the IRS sends out. Sometimes it requires for you to review stuff that they send you in the mail, such as if you submitted tax returns for a couple different years and you're waiting for that to get processed. Here's where the tools come into place for you to follow up. Brings us to Chapter 12, which is getting the right help. There's a lot of free help out there, absolutely free options. First is maybe your prior tax professional. They might be a good resource to begin with. And if they're part of the problem, do not go back. It's time to find somebody else. Some of the free options is, even when it comes to tax filing, there's a lot of free options, including VITA sites, which is the Voluntary Income Tax Assistance Program. There's a lot of free locations that do help out with the tax filings. Now, keep in mind, there are sometimes income limitations and certain deductions they just do not do. Now, keep in mind, there's certain qualifications that's needed to qualify for VITA. If you're hitting some IRS dead ends, the IRS also has a taxpayer advocate service. However, you're supposed to try to resolve all of your issues first, explain what you did to try to fix it before they take on your case. And they do not take on all cases. If you're looking for some help, one of the 3 different licenses, which is either an enrolled agent, an attorney or a CPA might help you out. A lot of commercials that you see out there are normally man-powered by a commission salesperson, not a qualified tax professional. So be very careful on who you're talking to. If the person is not licensed, more than likely that person has nothing to lose, and you could possibly spend thousands of dollars and a whole lot of time just completely wasted. So best is to deal with somebody that's qualified, experienced, and licensed. This way you do not waste your time or money. Chapter 13. This is the totality of the circumstances. Now, discussing the 12 prior chapters, there are times where we put a temporary solution in place. In the meanwhile, there's hold times by the IRS regarding processing of something that was filed. And once everything is processed, then you might qualify for something higher, which is why we put everything together. We review your totality of the circumstances, your past hardships, your current hardships, and that's what the solution lies in place. And keep in mind, one of the things we said at the very beginning is to make sure you have a correction of taxes. Because what happens if you fix everything now? In 5 years, in 6 years, in 7 years, if you have a fresh and brand new problem, then it all may come right back to you. So, a lot of things to be considered that's off paper is your mentality to see what you want to do to fix things. Are you going to do whatever it takes? Maybe hire some help, maybe pick up the phone. And right now, it is all up to you to put it all together. Whether you do things and be resourceful enough to review the tax law, review additional sources of information, or you hire the right help. The most important thing is that you take action and you proceed with the next steps.